So the new Abyss for the second half of version 5.6, kind of the version 5.7, which is going to be released in a few days, has just came out. Welcome to Ethereal Genshin, where you will find all the most detailed endgame related guides, as well as so on and much more. Now before we start off the video, here is the disclaimer on screen right now. Feel free to pause the video in order to take a look. Now for the Phase Blessing, whenever a character deals cryo damage to an opponent, it will tally up a stack. Whenever the count reaches 4, a shockwave will be unleashed at the opponent's location, dealing true damage, thus resetting that stack count. One of such shockwaves can be triggered every 4 seconds. If you do happen to be running cryo characters for this particular phase, this is a nice little additional damage, and true damage does ignore the enemy's defenses, so it's a nice little increment, but it's not a thing that is worth playing around, just a nice thing to have. Now starting off with flow 11, we do have the leyline disorders are as such. All party members will gain both 60% cryo and pyro damage bonus. This buff will provide quite a good benefit for any cryo and pyro DPS or any teams that are built around this bonus. For Chamber 1, the first half, we start off with the first wave with 4 of the different fungi from Sumeru. All of them have slightly higher resistance to their own respective element, and they do start pretty well grouped up to each other. So honestly, there's not real strategy here. You just try to spread your damage for the fastest time, and ideally you do want to kill them or stagger them enough so that they don't actually fly super high. And they do have a mechanic where if you apply Electro, they become activated and start becoming more aggressive and do more attacks, but it's not going to be too relevant because they're not very strong. So after that, the second wave, we do have 1 Stern Shield Crab and 1 Bubbler Seahorse. Both of them have their respective elemental shields being Pyro and Electro. However, unlike regular shields, it doesn't exactly make them impervious to damage. They simply just have high resistance. So if you want to deal with the Electro shield, you can use Pyro, Cryo or Dendro. And for the Crab's Pyro shield, use either Hydro or Electro. Alternatively, you can also use certain Anemo elemental bursts that have elemental absorption abilities to help you break their shields. Examples would include both Kazuha bursts, Venti bursts, and lastly Sucrose bursts. Now for the last third wave, we do have a singular Electro Lava Chill, which does have 50% physical resistance and 70% electro resistance. You can try to remove the Electro Shield because removing the Electro Shield will make his attacks pull down and he will essentially become less aggressive. So for his first attack, he will generally shield up and activate his Electro Shield. After that happens, you do want to go directly behind him and make him face towards the edge of the arena. This is because his first attack will always be to do a jump attack towards you, so ideally try to dodge this attack by using Elemental Burst or simply taking advantage of the iframes from dodging. Once he does the jump, you can immediately set up your abilities and make sure you try to keep him facing towards the edge so that he doesn't jump out of your way. Now for the second half, the first wave, you're going to deal with 2 Hydro Phantasms. They're both immune to Hydro, but on top of that, they're always Hydro infused. You can take advantage of this by getting free Hydro reactions, such as applying free Pyro to get the damage bonus from Vaporize. After you deal with 2 of them, you get the second wave being 2 Adult Baptismal V-Shaps. They do have 30% physical and Hydro resistance respectively. Now, the only notable thing about these enemies is that they do have a split attack where they charge it up, and if you get hit by that water ball, it will drain 10 energy from your active character. So it is ideal for you to try to dodge this, and if you don't have enough energy, it will drain your HP instead. The most notable thing about these 2 is that they will get staggered a lot and extremely easily at a fact. So I would say the only strategy here is to maybe try to get them to walk towards the side of the arena. But granted, if you do have enough damage, you can just deal with them one at a time, assuming that you'll have plenty of time to deal with in the first place. And once we're done, we'll move on to Chamber 2. For the first half, we do have the 3 Serpent Knight duos, followed by the Hydro, Cryo, and Pyro variant. All of them have 30% physical resistance as well as 50% res to their own respective elements. Now, all of these Husk Knights do have a special anti-shield mechanic, which only activates if they hit you and your active character has a shield. The Anemo one will teleport away somewhere behind you, basically a free iframe. The Hydro one will release an aura that will heal his allies over time. The Cryo one will turn his bow into a shield, making him impervious to any attacks from the front. And lastly, the Pyro one will grant his allies a Pyro shield. So the strategy here is you go to the Cryo Archer on the right side because the rest will generally come towards you. but keep in mind that they are relatively closely grouped, so grouping here is not too necessary. And on top of that, try to keep in mind certain abilities like they can stagger like Bennett Burst or Kea Burst and Beidou Burst, etc. will push them away quite a bit. So if you do want to try to go for grouping, just try to keep that part in mind. Otherwise, there's no particular strategy for them. The second wave will be the two Wind Cutter Husk Knights. These two once again have no particular strategy, they don't attack too much. Just deal with them and you're good to go. For the second half, we start off the first wave with the two of the three Polychrome Tri-Stars Natlan Local Legend. Both of them will have their own elemental shields and which are super weak to Pyro and Cryo respectively. Pyro for the Cryo Gunner and Cryo for the Electro Hammer. So the unique thing, unlike the previous variants, is that for whatever reason, the Electro Hammer will always activate his shield first, and the Cryo Gunner will do about 1 to 2 attacks before activating his shield. So it's basically almost impossible to try to kill them both at the same time unless you have really high DPS or break their shield both at the same time. The best strategy here is to deal with the Electro Hammer first by removing his shield with enough Cryo. Once you kill off the Electro Hammer, he does have a Metrodome effect, where upon death it will drop a little bomb which will do an AoE Electro Explosion, which does electro damage, and it will restore all of its allies' shield nearby back to 100%. If you do have enough Pyro characters in this team with enough Pyro application, the Cryo Gunner shouldn't really be that big of a deal, so you can just break the shield again even if it goes back to full. If you have enough damage, it's possible for you to kill them both at the same time, or if not, remove the Cryo Gunner shield and kill him before the Electro Hammer's Metrodome effect restores its shield to full. Once you deal with both of them, keep in mind that the Cryo Gunner has also the Metrodome effect, so it will drop this little bomb which releases a field that does very high damage over time of AoE Cryo damage. So once this is done, try to just be careful and not die, because it does do quite a tremendous amount of damage. Afterwards, the second wave will spawn the Biting Cold Wayop manifestation, which does have 50% cryo resistance. It will start off with the Trials move for the next 13 seconds, of which it will drain all the energy of anyone within the radius, which is indicated by the circle. And for the next 13 seconds, it will create a Ward Shield, of which your goal is to try to break this within that time. If you're able to break the Ward Shield in time, you will get all of your energy back and the Wayop will be stunned for about 5 seconds or so. If you fail to break the Ward Shield in time, it will convert the remaining Ward into a Cryo Shield, which can be broken with the appropriate elements such as Pyro or Electro. There are two strategies here, where either after you kill the Cryo Gunner, you unleash all your abilities, and let's say you have a shield or enough healing to survive the AoE Cryo Bomb that the Cryo Gunner leaves behind, and hopefully kill the Wayop either before it creates the Trials move or just break the shield in time while staying alive. But very likely, I don't think most of you will have the ability to do this unless you have enough investment. So the second strategy is to simply run away. Just wait for about 13 seconds. Once the Cryo Shield is up, hopefully you brought a Pyro character that can apply enough Pyro, then you can start unleashing all your elemental bursts, and then the rest is history. Now for Chamber 3, the first wave on the first half will have a singular Abyss Lecter. Now the most notable thing about him is that he does have certain moves which will summon Electro Balls that sap your energy, so ideally try to dodge this whenever possible. Once you deal enough damage and his HP is about 5% if I remember correctly, it will do an AoE explosion and create an Electro Shield. You want to deplete the Electro Shield with elements such as Pyro, Cryo or Dendro in order to take care of him. Hydro doesn't reduce the shield directly, but it does take a bit of time to reduce it by triggering Electro Charge. You can also use the Anemo Burst interaction that I mentioned previously, like Kazuha Venti or Sucrose Burst, and make sure that the abilities absorb the right elements to help you in breaking the shield. And once he's low on shield HP, you can stall or delay killing him and try to use that time to farm your energy with your elemental skills. This is important because of the second wave. Now the second wave, we do have the Pyro Wayop manifestation. I already explained the Trials move. He has high Pyro resistance. Strategy would include using freeze or certain abilities to stagger him out of the first move. And of course, if he does generate the Pyro Shield if you fail, you can break it with Hydro or Electro. Now for the second half, we do have the Natlan local legend, the Electro Turtle Kokisho. I think that's how you pronounce it. It does have 50% physical resistance and 70% electro resistance. Now the most notable mechanic he has, like the local legend variant, is that after taking a total of 34 hits, it will summon an Electro Shield which has about 16 units worth of gauge unit. And whenever he does have the shield, all of his attacks will become enhanced and will do significantly more damage. So if you do get to this phase, just try to be a bit careful in case you might accidentally die because you weren't paying attention, because that happened to me quite a few times. Now for floor 12, the leyline disorders are as such. The first half, whenever characters have 0 energy, they just get a damage boost of 75%, and this is very much clear for both Skirk and Maoika. While I have seen some comments stating that despite not having 0 energy, the thing still buffs your damage a little bit, I can neither confirm nor deny this part, so I'm gonna pretend like that part doesn't exist. For the second half, the character's normal attack cryo damage is increased by 75%. This is very much intended for Skirk, however this can be used by units like Ayaka or any normal attack DPS under the effect of Chongyun's cryo infusion from his elemental skill. Now for Chamber 1 on the first half, we start off the first wave with 2 Fatui Cryo Sissin Mage. They take more damage from physical, but they do have 50% cryo resistance. Their first move will always be to summon a cryo shield and a bunch of Sissins along the way. You could either bring the right elements like Pyro and Electro being the second best to try to break the shield and brute force it, or if you don't have the right elements, you can try to kill all the little flies known as Sissins around it, because eliminating all of the Sissins will remove the shield too. Once you dealt with that, the second wave will be the Wayward Hermetic Speaker or the boss from Natlan. It does have particularly high cryo resistance, which can be negated if you do have enough rest shredding characters. Now, she takes a bit of time to just do her own thing, and after a short delay, she will split herself into 4 cryo clones. Breaking the first 2 cryo clones will bring her back to normal and stun her for a few seconds, while breaking all 4 clones will bring her back and stun her for even longer. If you are not tied to Circle Impact, the best strategy here is to go for the clone that is furthest from you, because the thing is that she will occasionally send one of her 4 clones to teleport to you and attack you, and they only do 1 attack before they swap between all different clones. So they rotate from clone 1, clone 2, clone 3, and clone 4. If you're not tied to Circle Impact, let's say you run like Shengling with Chevreau or Maoika or whatnot, just try to go for the clone that is a bit far away so that you can actually hit 2 clones at the same time. Repeat this again until you're able to break her out of the clones, and you should be able to do all your rotations here, and she will lose a lot of resistance and be stunned for a short period of time. There is also a chance that you may be able to break the clone that contains the real enemy, so you'll get a bit of damage here. And if you don't have the right elements, you can also consider bringing Ororon or Sitlali, because if you use their charge attack, like Ororon's aim shot bow charge attack, or Sitlali's whole aim charge attack, this will freeze the clones and reduce their shield by 25%. Now for the second half, you start off with 2 filler enemies with the Ruin Defender and Ruin Scout. There's honestly nothing of note between these two, you just try to kill them both together. Now for the Perpetual Mechanical Ori, better known as a PMA, he has high physical resistance, but the rest is pretty neutral. A few notes that I can share here is that he does have a fixed attack pattern for this particular combo. He will start off with the Blade Spin, where he spins towards you, and this one will push your hitbox because his hitbox is freaking massive. And then afterwards, his second attack, he will follow up with a simple Sword Slash. After the Sword Slash, he will initiate a Rocket Blast, where he will fly up in the air and land briefly afterwards. This is indicated by the red circle on the ground. One quick tip here is that if you do run Circle Impact teams, you can bait him to land on your abilities. Let's say your Rosaria Burst is there, your Bennett Burst is there. Whenever he does fly up in the air, you just remain there and make sure you dodge the abilities when it's time. Once its HP reaches 30%, it will enter defensive mode, where it will take no damage and split into 4 Ruined Sentinels. Kill the Sentinel that is marked by the glowing ring around them in order to expose the core. Now for the grouping for all 4, this is what advice I can offer. The best one is the Ruin Cruiser, indicated by the triangle Dorito looking shape. Now whenever it spawns, you want to run towards it and make sure you face it towards the core. Give it a bit of a moment, let it dash back towards the core, and then afterwards you can just go to it and set up your abilities. If you do get the Ruin Destroyer, aka the Snake, what you want to do is go in between it and the core. This is a little bit tricky, but you don't want to be too near it so that it doesn't do a melee attack, but you also don't want to be too far from it so it doesn't initiate a range attack. I have been able to deal with this strategy at about 50% of a succession, or roughly around that amount, but there is a specific sweet spot and it tends to lean slightly nearer towards the core. For the Ruin Defender or the Crab, Go near it when it spawns, and then once you see its body forming up with the legs, you want to run back past the core. Because after it forms itself, it will detect that you are too far out of its attack range, which you can try to bait his jump attack. If it does do the jump attack, you can go next to the core. If it doesn't, it is what it is. And the jellyfish, there's no particular strategy for the Ruin Scout. You can try to wait for it to come towards you, but that's gonna take, I would say, like 5 to 10 seconds, which is too much time, so just go to it and stop your rotation. And then once the core explores, just make sure you deal with it before it comes back. For Chamber 2, we start off the first wave with 3 Yamkasaurs, and grouping doesn't matter here because their attacks will make them propel towards you. You can ideally try to delay using certain staggering abilities like, say, Chaos Burst, Rosaria Burst, etc., so that it prevents you from knocking them away from each other. Once they're all grouped up, you can strategically try to keep them both together and try to deal with all 3 of them at the same time. And the second wave will be followed by the Kongamato, aka the Big Chungus. His most notable resistance is that he does have high dendro resistance at 70%. Now the Pyro element is preferred here, however it is not necessary. The gimmick move he does have is that whenever it spawns, there are 3 fruits on the ground. If you hit these fruits with Pyro, it will detonate them and make Kongamato take more damage. Detonating all 3 will result in it taking 15% of its max HP as damage and stun it for about 10 to 15 seconds. Other notable moves that you should be wary of is the first one is the spinning move. After you deal with the Pyro Fruit gimmick move, it will eventually puff its belly and initiate this spinning move. Usually it doesn't move much from the center, so it will start off the spinning move from the center towards the outer part of the arena, and then after maybe 1 or 2 attacks or immediately, it will puff its belly again and try to go back to the center. So keep in mind that whenever it does this move, if you run Circle Impact teams, it will eventually go back to the center, so you can play around this information. Of course, the second move, which he will basically open the first attack every time with, is the Triple Laser Spit. He spits a beam from his mouth 3 times, where each of these beams have the potential to do a lot of damage and eventually maybe one-shot you if you're not careful. But once you're done, we'll move on to the second half. Now, the first wave, we will have the Electro Abyss Nectar. I've already mentioned this part before. Try to dodge his Electro Balls attack to prevent your energy from getting sapped. Once his HP is low, he'll become invulnerable, enter phase 2, and create an Electro Shield. Break the Electro Shield with elements such as Pyro, Cryo, and Dendro in order to deal with him completely. And of course, you can use a Nemo Elemental Burst with Absorption to help you break his shield. After you deal with him, the second wave will be the Millennial Pearl Seahorse. The Abyss variant will have about 90% resistance to everything, 140% resistance to Electro particularly. It will take a few seconds to spawn, so you can use your elemental skills to try to gain all your energy back. And ideally, you want to break the Pearl with Pyro, Cryo, and Dendro in order to stun it temporarily and reduce its resistance. Now, you can technically ignore the Pearl mechanic if you run multiple red shredding units such as Kazuha with VV paired together with Shilone and Skill, Escofia's passive solo, or you pair her together with Shenhe's Elemental Burst, Eula's Hold skill paired together with Superconduct, or any of the relevant combos. Now, for the one notable thing I can share is that he does have a relatively fixed attack pattern. His first attack after he spawns and twirls around, he will basically go back a bit before moving forward and summon these homing electrofish thing. So if you do want to use your Circle Impact abilities, you do want to play around that, set up your abilities right before he's about to go back to you, and then try to break the Pearl as fast as possible. And then the follow-up attacks tend to be the tail swipe into the double spin attack. So this information will be really helpful in figuring out the timing on how fast you have to break the Pearl. However, once the Pearl Shield is low, it will try to fly up in the air and summon like 3 Coral Orbs on the ground. Now what that happens, he'll just do a Lightning Strike, which does leave behind an Electro Field. So try not to get that near the Seahorse, because if you play a Hyperloom team, this may actually cause you to lose a few Hyperloom triggers. So ideally, you do want to try to break the Pearl as fast as possible. You can break these Coral Orbs by using any elements outside of Electro and Hydro. Break all 3 of these orbs to stun the Seahorse and bring it down. And of course, ideally try to break the Pearl before he does this move, because it will eat quite a bit of your time. Now for Chamber 3, the first wave, we do start off with 3 Nimble Harvester Max of the Numa variant. If you do have abilities that can cause some amount of stagger, for example like Heia Burst or Rosaria Burst, Bennett Burst or Xingqiu or whatnot, The strategy here would be to either go to the left or to the right side of where they spawn and try to use your abilities to stagger them on top of each other. And then the rest is just as it is, just try to kill them as fast as possible before they start using the ability to move really far. If you can continue their stagger somehow, then you should be able to deal with them really fast before you get to the second wave. You can also alternatively play with the Arca mechanic by utilizing Wuxia align attacks. I've already mentioned this part in the previous chamber, so go check out which characters you can use to actually stun these Fontaine mechs. However, once you deal with these three, you're gonna have the Nemesis of Coppelius. Now, it will have extremely high resistance at the start of the fight, so use this time to regain your energy with Elemental skill. Shortly afterwards, he will send out Coppelia to the outer ring and initiate the climax attack, where he will spawn a Cryo Shield. Of course, the Cryo Shield is the weakest to Pyro, second weakest to Electro, and you can use elements like Geo and Anemo, which will take a bit of time, and blunt attacks from like punch attacks or Claymore normal hits. However, you can break his shield in one hit by using Wuxia align attacks. These would include Chevreur's skill, Cloran's skill, Escoffier's skill, Purna's normal attack in the DPS mode, Lynette's skill, Navia's skill, Sijuin's skill, and lastly Rise the Burst. So this whole climax attack move, he will generally repeat it about 3 times, so be prepared to break the shield for approximately that many times and try to kill him before, well, let's say less than 30 seconds, because I think according to the wiki, after 30 seconds of the first set of climax attack, he will go back to it eventually, so try to get the DPS done in time. For the final chamber, we do have the Secret Source Automaton, the Overseer device. Now, it will start off the round by doing its special move where it summons these Hydro Lasers, and it will have a bar right above its HP. So essentially, it will gain 5 points per second, and the more points it has, the more damage it will do, and the faster the laser will spin. If it's high enough, it will spawn about 4 lasers, and the way for you to reduce this is by hitting him with Cryo. Each Cryo hit you do will decrease its bar by 4 points, but because it builds up 5 points per second, ideally you do want to run at least 2 Cryo units, or if not, run a character that is able to apply Cryo fast enough to deplete that part. Once it reaches 10 points or below, it will enter a state where it will lose a lot of resistance, thus being your best window to applying the most damage. Alternatively, it does have a Natlan anti-counter-strike gimmick, where if you look at the yellow bar that is on its outskirt, the more colorful or the more the bar builds up, the faster it will reach the Natlan Counter-Strike state. So every time a character enters the Natlan Knight's Soul Blessing state, it will gain 30 points, and for every second that the character maintains the Knight's Soul Blessing state, it will gain 10 points. Upon reaching the maximum amount of bar, and the Cryo bar is at least above 10 points where the laser is out and about, it will swap to the Counter-Strike mode, where it will change its attacks to this little tracking thing on the ground. It will try to track your current location and summon this continuous Hydro Waterfall Explosion thing. Why this is important is because, thanks to Zajef for this one, is that it has 210% resistance to everything for the Abyss variant, while it is in the regular laser spin mode where you want to play Cryo. However, the moment it enters the Night Soul Blessing state, it actually loses that resistance and goes back to the regular 50%. While it's not necessarily low, if you use any sort of characters that can reduce resistance, this form should be quite helpful if you so happen to run a Natlan based team that is able to consistently build up this state. Other than that, there's no real strategy here. For the most part, either you bring enough Cryo character to do this, or you try to play a Natlan based team that is able to trigger the Counter-Strike mode consistently. As for the Cryo units that can work in reducing the bar, any characters that can use a very fast sequence of normal attacks are very good. Aside from the likes of Skirk, we do have Rise Lee with the normal attack spam, as well as Ayaka. Charlotte normal attack, you can pair it up together with the burst and the whole skill from her ability. If you do want to use Ganyu, ideally you want to combine the charge attack and at minimum try to have her burst up. Chaos Burst is able to reduce it alone at Constellation 6. However, his burst only lasts for 8 seconds, so I don't exactly recommend it unless you have a second Cryo unit in your team. However, another 4-star unit that you can use to solo the bar is Layla. Both her elemental skill and her burst combos into bringing the bar down to below 10 points, thus putting him in the low resistance state. Ideally, you want to take advantage of her abilities where using elemental skills on other units while her shield is up will generate 2 stars per. This will allow you to generate the maximum 4 stars on her shield, and once it reaches the maximum, it'll launch itself, thus applying more cryo. And of course, if you do happen to have Chongyun in your team, you can use normal attacks and use the cryo infusion from his elemental skill in order to bring down the bar. And that is it for the guide video. So the one thing I'll be doing different this time, starting from this particular abyss, is that I will be making a follow-up video talking about the reaction tier list, as well as the teams that I've tested and what kind of teams I can recommend for this particular abyss. So if you're interested in that, feel free to stick around. And as usual, if you find this video informative, you enjoyed the information and everything that I presented, give this video a like to show some support. If you want to stick around for that follow-up video for what kind of teams I can recommend, hit the subscribe button. And of course, if you want to share the teams that you use to clear and ideally get 36 stars, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below, because it helps me to get a rough idea of what kind of teams that you guys are running, and I could probably use them in my Abyss redeems over on my Twitch channel. Otherwise, I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors, and hopefully you can try to get your 36 stars at last. And this is Ethereal, signing off. Peace out.